The evening air was thick with anticipation as the lights in the studio brightened and cameras began their steady whir. For Sophia Delacroix, the prime-time liberal TV host with a reputation for uncompromising commentary, tonight was meant to be just another installment of her daily routine. But as the red live light illuminated the set, something in her changed. It wasn't the usual adrenaline rush that came with delivering biting social critiques or challenging the power structures of the day. It was an almost palpable conviction, an intensity that hinted at a breaking point. Sophia had always believed that the truth, however uncomfortable, was the most potent force against corruption. Over the years, her career had been built on fearless commentary, dissecting the narratives spun by the world's most powerful figures. On tonight's show, the subject was none other than Elon Musk, a man who, in her eyes, had become a symbol of unfettered power. A billionaire whose influence reached into every corner of society. The assignment was clear: to expose what she believed were hidden truths behind the facade of technological innovation and entrepreneurial bravado. As the cameras rolled, Sophia locked eyes with the lens, her expression fierce and resolute. "This evening, we take a hard look at the titan of tech, Elon Musk," she began, her voice steady but laced with a passion that few had witnessed before. For too long, we have seen billionaires parade as saviors while quietly building empires on dubious practices. It's time for us to wake up and see the truth. There was a deliberate pause, perfectly choreographed, to give the audience time to absorb every syllable. And then came the statement that would alter the course of her life. "I have it on good authority that Musk has been suppressing damaging information about his past dealings, engaging in illegal financial cover-ups, silencing whistleblowers, and let's not even get started on the personal scandals that insiders have hinted at for years. And yet, people still worship him as if he were infallible." There was no citation of official documents or verified reports, only the weight of her conviction and the vague mention of unnamed insiders. In an era dominated by sensationalism and viral moments, such an unsubstantiated claim was enough to ignite social media. Within minutes of the broadcast, hashtags like Elon Exposed began trending, and platforms erupted with heated debates. Opinions split into two fierce camps, one fiercely defending Musk, insisting that this was nothing more than another opportunistic rant from a media personality chasing ratings, the other, captivated by the possibility of hidden truths finally coming to light, embraced her words as gospel. Even as the live segment ended and the studio lights dimmed, the reverberations of Sophia's words continued to echo through digital corridors. In the control room, technicians and producers exchanged uneasy glances. For years, the show had danced on the razor's edge of controversy, but tonight felt different. The air was charged with the unmistakable energy of a storm gathering on the horizon. Within an hour, a single tweet from Elon Musk ignited the situation further. "This woman just committed career suicide. See you in court." The message was stark and unyielding, a promise of retribution that reverberated across the internet. Musk's response was as calculated as it was chilling. There was no elaborate defense, no immediate factual rebuttal, just a cold, concise threat that sent shockwaves through every corner of the media world. Back in her dressing room, Sophia stared at her phone as messages, calls, and notifications flooded in. Her usually confident facade began to crack under the weight of the unfolding chaos. Producers were calling, legal advisors were reaching out with grave warnings, and even some of her long-standing allies in the industry began to distance themselves. For a moment, the gravity of what she had done became undeniably clear. This was no longer just about a controversial opinion. It was about her very future. Her longtime producer Max barged into her sanctuary of calm with a furrowed brow and a tone that brooked no argument. "Sophia, we need to get ahead of this," he said, his voice low but urgent. "Musk's legal team is drafting paperwork as we speak. We're looking at a defamation suit, and this is serious." His words, laden with the certainty of impending disaster, cut through the haze of her initial bravado. For the first time that night, uncertainty and trepidation crept in as the full scope of the situation took shape. Sophia's mind raced back over her career. Every time she'd taken a stand, every time she'd pushed the boundaries of what was acceptable, always convinced that her fearless reporting was a necessary sacrifice for truth. But tonight, the stakes were higher. Instead of a routine battle with public opinion, she was now staring down the barrel of an all-out legal war that threatened not only her reputation, but her entire career. The notion of going head-to-head with one of the world's richest and most influential men, backed by an army of legal experts and an unyielding PR machine, was terrifying. The ensuing hours were a blur of phone calls, frantic meetings, and a cascade of emails that demanded immediate answers. The network's legal team sprang into action, drafting a carefully worded statement intended to walk back the more incendiary parts of her broadcast without completely undermining her credibility. On last night's program, I shared concerns about Elon Musk and his business practices, based on discussions with multiple sources. I stand by my commitment to journalistic integrity and the pursuit of truth. However, if any statements were misinterpreted or taken out of context, I am open to a dialogue on the matter. The statement was weak, its vagueness failing to satisfy either side of the debate, but it was a desperate attempt to calm the rapidly escalating situation. Yet even as the statement went live, Musk's response was immediate and scathing. "No misinterpretation, no context needed. You lied. See you in court." His words were like a verdict passed without trial, a judgment that sealed the fate of the evening's controversial broadcast. Social media became a battleground, with Musk's supporters decrying what they saw as an irresponsible journalist, while his detractors began to see the controversy as evidence of a broader campaign of corporate silencing. Sophia found herself at a crossroads. Over the decades, she had weathered storms of criticism and hostile media coverage, but nothing had prepared her for the combination of personal attack and institutional betrayal that now loomed. Her network, once a supportive platform for her provocative ideas, was beginning to distance itself. Phone calls from executives, once full of encouragement and plans for ratings battles, had transformed into terse warnings and ultimatums. The next morning, the true extent of the fallout became evident. An internal email leaked to the press revealed discussions from the network's legal department that had considered terminating her contract if the lawsuit materialized. Suddenly, Sophia's personal vendetta against Musk was not just a headline. It was an existential threat to her career. Major news outlets seized the story, each twisting the narrative to suit their audience. Some portrayed it as a classic battle between free speech and billionaire might. Others painted it as a reckless overreach by a media personality willing to gamble everything on a single incendiary broadcast. Morning talk shows were ablaze with commentary. If you're going to accuse one of the most powerful men in the world of criminal activity, one panelist argued, you better come armed with indisputable receipts. Another pundit challenged, Elon Musk has never shied away from legal battles. If Delacroix truly has evidence, why not show it? The atmosphere was electric, and for every supporter who rallied behind her, there was a detractor who called her a fraud and an attention seeker. In the midst of the chaos, Sophia received a call from her lawyer, Aaron Fisk. His voice, normally measured and pragmatic, carried a note of grim finality. "Sophia, this is not a fight you can win in court," he warned. "Defamation cases are complex, and Musk's legal team has resources that dwarf anything you've faced before. If this goes to trial, you're going to lose. Not just your job, but your credibility for life. His words were both a caution and a resignation to the inevitable. Either back down and concede, or face the possibility of ruin. Sophia's internal struggle deepened as she sat alone in her sparsely decorated office later that morning. Every instinct screamed for her to double down on her beliefs, to use this moment as a platform for larger truths about the intersection of power, media, and corruption. Yet the stark reality was undeniable. The network was already weighing the cost of keeping her on air. The very foundation of her career, built on the promise of fearless journalism, was crumbling beneath the pressure of legal threats and corporate self-preservation. In a dimly lit conference room at the network's headquarters, the atmosphere was somber and laden with the weight of impending decisions. Sophia sat across from a panel of executives, their faces etched with the cold pragmatism of corporate risk assessment. Her boss, Mark Ellison, was the first to speak. "We've considered all options," he began, his tone measured but final. "Given the potential fallout from Musk's lawsuit, the media circus, and the overall risk to the network, the best course of action is for you to step down." For Sophia, the words were like a knife twisting in an already deep wound. "Step down?" she repeated, her voice barely concealing a mix of disbelief and anger. The suggestion that she should quietly exit the very arena in which she had built her reputation felt like a betrayal. "We're prepared to present it as a mutual decision," one executive interjected, trying to sound reassuring. "You'll release a statement focusing on independent journalism, and in return, we'll offer a generous severance package. This way, we can defuse the situation before it escalates further." "But how could it possibly get worse?" she challenged, incredulous that anyone could suggest an end to her career would be preferable to the controversy she had stirred. Mark Ellison's eyes were steely as he replied, "If you refuse, we'll have no choice but to terminate your contract for violating our editorial standards, and then you'll be fighting Musk's lawsuit and his entire legal apparatus alone." The room fell into a heavy silence as the implications of his words sank in. Sophia realized that this wasn't just about a single controversial broadcast. It was a moment of reckoning, a test of her dedication to the truth against the crushing force of corporate interests and billionaire influence. Her mind raced. Every news report, every trending hashtag, every furious email from supporters and detractors alike was a reminder that her battle was not just personal, it was emblematic of a larger struggle for journalistic integrity. It was then that her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your email. I have something you need to see." With a trembling hand, she opened her laptop and clicked on the new message. What appeared on screen was a document that would change everything. A leaked internal memo from Tesla's legal department, marked with an ominous subject line, "Media Containment Strategy." The memo detailed preemptive legal tactics aimed at silencing journalists who had dared to question Musk's businesses, and right in the middle of the document, her name appeared. The realization hit her like a freight train. Her segment was not an isolated act of bravado. It was part of a broader, premeditated strategy to control the narrative and stifle dissent. The document was irrefutable evidence that powerful interests were orchestrating a campaign to muzzle critical voices before they could even be heard. Her pulse pounded as she reread the memo, each word confirming that the forces aligned against her were not only vast, but also meticulously organized. She looked up from the screen, her eyes burning with a newfound determination. "I'm not stepping down," she declared, her voice resonating with a clarity that startled even herself. In that moment, Sophia realized that she had discovered a leverage that could potentially flip the narrative on its head. That night, as the city outside buzzed with uncertainty, Sophia and her legal team gathered in a cramped apartment that served as her temporary command center. Aaron Fisk paced the room, outlining their next steps with a mix of urgency and strategic calculation. "We have two options," he explained. "We either bury this whole incident by issuing a weak statement and hoping it blows over, or we flip the script. We expose the internal memo and frame this as an attack on journalistic freedom, a billionaire trying to silence a voice that dared to speak the truth." The decision was fraught with risk. Releasing the memo meant inviting a torrent of legal counterattacks, but it also had the potential to rally public support behind Sophia. The discussion stretched late into the night, punctuated by moments of heated debate and long silences filled with the weight of the moment. Ultimately, the group reached a consensus. The only way forward was to risk everything for the sake of the truth. Sophia's resolve hardened. With trembling fingers, she typed out a new statement that would be broadcast the following evening. "Tonight, I stand not just as a journalist, but as a guardian of free speech," the statement began. "When powerful figures use their resources to intimidate and silence those who ask difficult questions, we all lose. I have in my possession a document, a confidential memo outlining a preemptive strategy to muzzle journalists like myself. This is not just about one man or one network. It is about the right of the public to know the truth. I will not be silenced." The statement was raw and honest, a stark departure from the measured tone of her previous broadcasts. When it aired the next evening, the impact was immediate. Newsrooms and social media platforms lit up with debates over the ethics of corporate power and media freedom. Legal analysts dissected the memo, calling it a smoking gun that exposed a deliberate attempt to control the press. Public opinion, already polarized by the earlier controversy, began to shift as more and more voices expressed outrage over what appeared to be an orchestrated campaign against a fearless journalist. Elon Musk, however, was not one to remain silent. His response came quickly, a terse post on his social media platform. "Media figures think they can lie with zero consequences. Not this time." The post, like all his communications, was calculated to undermine her credibility while simultaneously galvanizing his loyal base. The hashtag #StandWithSophia began trending alongside "Media Silenced" as supporters of free speech and defenders of Musk's empire clashed in an online war of words. In the days that followed, the pressure mounted from every direction. Sophia's phone was inundated with messages of support and condemnation alike. Former colleagues reached out with both apologies and warnings. The network, which had initially considered letting her go, now found itself caught in a public relations maelstrom. Executives who had once talked in closed doors were forced to address the crisis publicly, and the narrative of a lone journalist against a corporate titan became the story du jour. For Sophia, the next few weeks blurred together in a haze of legal meetings, media interviews, and sleepless nights. Every headline, every news segment, every commentary on cable news dissected her every move. Behind the scenes, her once trusted network was caught between a rock and a hard place. Internal documents leaked that executives had been discussing not only her potential termination, but also the possibility of restructuring the entire political commentary segment in order to avoid further litigation. Sponsors began withdrawing their support, wary of being associated with what they called a volatile narrative. The relentless pressure began to take a toll on Sophia. In the quiet moments, when the cameras were off and the world was left to its own devices, doubts crept in. Had she miscalculated? Was her fight for truth worth risking everything? Her reputation, her career, and even her personal safety? The weight of public opinion, legal threats, and corporate indifference was crushing. Yet, amidst the chaos, a fierce resolve grew within her. This was larger than her. It was a battle for the very essence of journalism. Late one night, in the dim glow of her apartment, Sophia sat alone with her thoughts. The city outside was silent. the usual hum of traffic replaced by a rare stillness that allowed her mind to wander. She thought back to her earliest days as a reporter, those long nights chasing down stories in forgotten corners of the city, the thrill of uncovering truths that others wished to keep hidden, and the deep, unyielding belief that the media could serve as a bulwark against injustice. In those memories, she found the strength to push back against the overwhelming tide of fear and uncertainty. Her inner monologue was interrupted by the persistent buzz of her phone. Messages from supporters who reminded her that this wasn't just about one broadcast, but about setting a precedent for accountability. "We need more people like you," one message read. "Keep fighting, Sophia," another urged. In those digital affirmations, she rediscovered the purpose that had driven her all these years. A breakthrough came when a respected independent journalist managed to verify the leaked Tesla memo. Within days, the document was being discussed on news panels, debated in op-ed columns, and even referenced by influential lawmakers. What had begun as an isolated controversy had grown into a movement, a symbolic battle between the concentration of wealth and the integrity of the free press. For Sophia, the public revelation of the memo was a turning point. The memo not only validated her claims, but also exposed a disturbing reality: that powerful figures were willing to manipulate legal systems and corporate resources to silence dissent. The narrative was shifting. Instead of being cast as a reckless attention seeker, she was increasingly seen as a courageous whistleblower, a modern-day Cassandra speaking truth to power. At an emergency press conference arranged by her legal team, Sophia addressed a room filled with reporters, activists, and industry experts. Standing behind a podium, she recounted the events of that fateful night with a clarity that left little room for misinterpretation. "What happened last week wasn't just a lapse in judgment or a mistake in reporting," she said, her voice resonating with a mix of sorrow and determination. "It was a deliberate attempt to silence the truth. I stand before you not to defend myself, but to defend the very principles that make a free society possible." Her words were met with a mix of applause and skeptical murmurs, but one thing was clear: the public was no longer willing to let the powerful rewrite history without accountability. Social media campaigns demanding transparency and justice surged, and influential voices in the media industry began to rally behind her. It was as if the controversy had inadvertently united a disparate coalition of journalists, free speech advocates, and even former allies of Musk who now questioned the ethics of his actions. Yet, as with any high-stakes battle, the pressure was relentless. Behind closed doors, legal teams on both sides worked around the clock. Aaron Fisk, ever the strategist, spent countless hours poring over case files, trying to anticipate every legal maneuver that Musk's camp might deploy. "This isn't just about defending a broadcast," he confided in a hushed conversation with Sophia one evening. "It's about setting a precedent that no one is above the law and that truth will always find a way to surface." Across the nation, the fallout from the controversy rippled outward in unexpected ways. News networks that had once taken pride in their carefully curated narratives now found themselves grappling with a crisis of credibility. Industry insiders whispered about the true cost of taking on a billionaire, and academic circles began discussing the broader implications for media ethics and freedom of speech. Conferences were hastily convened, panel discussions were scheduled on prime time, and universities invited experts to debate the role of the press in holding power accountable. Sophia's case became a touchstone in these debates. Was it possible for a single journalist to stand against the combined might of corporate resources and billionaire influence? What did it mean for future generations of reporters if the consequences of a daring broadcast were the total collapse of one's career? The story, once confined to the screen of a single television network, had now taken on a life of its own. a living testament to the precarious balance between free speech and the forces that sought to undermine it. Even as public support swelled, the personal toll on Sophia was undeniable. Sleep became a distant memory, replaced by a constant state of vigilance and anxiety. Friends and colleagues, once abundant, now offered their sympathies from afar, fearful of being drawn into the maelstrom. The weight of isolation pressed down on her, yet with each day that passed, the clarity of her purpose grew. This was not just about survival, it was about reclaiming a voice for all those who had been silenced. In a quiet moment one afternoon, as rain pelted against her office window, Sophia allowed herself to reflect on the journey that had led her here. She thought of the countless interviews, the late nights poring over documents, and the relentless pursuit of stories that many deemed too dangerous. Those memories, painful yet empowering, reminded her that she had always been driven by a singular belief, that the truth was worth fighting for, no matter the cost. Just as the public began to rally behind her, a new twist emerged. Anonymous sources within Musk's legal team leaked details about an emergency court motion that sought to fast-track the case. The documents, filled with legal jargon and ominous projections, hinted at a lawsuit that would not only target Sophia, but also cast a wide net over her network. Rumors began to swirl about potential damages in the hundreds of millions, a figure so astronomical it seemed designed to crush any opposition. For Sophia, the announcement was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it validated her belief that she was facing an unprecedented legal assault. On the other, it intensified the pressure to deliver a robust counter-narrative that could deflect the looming threat. Her legal team advised caution, emphasizing that any misstep could provide the ammunition needed by Musk's camp. "We need to be strategic," Aaron repeated in one of their many late-night conference calls. "Our best chance is not to fight him in the courtroom, at least not initially, but to change the narrative. We need to show the world that this isn't just a personal vendetta, but an assault on the freedom of the press." This strategic shift required a coordinated effort that went far beyond the confines of a single broadcast. It meant reaching out to influential voices in the media, forming alliances with advocacy groups, and using every available platform to tell her side of the story. Sophia agreed to a series of high-profile interviews, both on traditional news outlets and emerging digital platforms. Each interview was meticulously planned, each answer measured to both assert her commitment to the truth and expose the disproportionate nature of the legal threat against her. In one particularly revealing interview with a renowned independent journalist, Sophia recounted the fateful night of her broadcast in minute detail. "I wasn't trying to create a scandal," she explained, her eyes searching the camera, as if daring it to betray her confidence. "I was trying to awaken a public that had grown complacent in the face of unchecked power. The allegations I made were based on conversations with insiders who, for their own safety, could not go on record. Yes, I lacked formal documentation, but the pattern of behavior, the very structure of corporate secrecy was clear enough for anyone who cared to look closely." Her words resonated with a raw honesty that struck a chord with viewers and critics alike. As the legal and media battles raged on, the personal stakes for Sophia reached unprecedented heights. Every day brought new challenges, a barrage of critical editorials, hostile social media comments, and even threats from unknown sources. There were nights when she found herself staring out at the darkened cityscape, questioning whether the cost of speaking out was too high. Yet, in those moments of solitude, she also recognized the power of her own voice, a beacon for others who might one day face similar struggles against towering institutions. One evening, as she returned to her modest apartment after a marathon day of interviews and strategy meetings, Sophia found herself wrestling with conflicting emotions. The toll of the public scrutiny was evident in the tired lines on her face, yet there was also a spark of determination in her eyes. a quiet defiance that refused to be extinguished by threats or intimidation. In the dim light of her living room, she reviewed the flurry of emails from supporters and legal updates from her team. Each message was a reminder that while she was on the front lines of a very personal battle, she was also part of a broader struggle for accountability and transparency in the modern era. In these moments, Sophia recalled the many mentors who had inspired her journey. The veteran journalists who had taught her that truth was a fragile but indispensable commodity, and the activists who had shown her that even in the face of overwhelming odds, one voice could spark a revolution. It was this legacy of courage that propelled her forward, even as the storm outside seemed unending. Then came the day when the balance began to tip decidedly in her favor. A renowned national newspaper, known for its incisive investigative reporting, published an in-depth exposé that linked several of Musk's questionable business practices with a broader pattern of corporate intimidation. The article, filled with interviews, data, and a careful dissection of legal maneuvers, placed Sophia's broadcast in context, painting it not as a reckless outburst, but as a legitimate critique of a man whose influence extended far beyond the boundaries of technology and entrepreneurship. The exposé struck a chord with the public. On social media, hashtags like Truth Against Power and Media Freedom started trending alongside the ongoing debate about Sophia's fate. People from all walks of life, journalists, academics, even former critics, began to rally around the idea that holding the powerful accountable was not just a professional duty but a moral imperative. The narrative had shifted from one of personal vendetta to a larger discourse about the health of democracy and the importance of a free press. The momentum was palpable. Corporate sponsors that had once retreated in fear now saw an opportunity to align themselves with a cause larger than any one individual. Advocacy groups organized rallies and press conferences, demanding transparency and accountability from those who sought to use their wealth to silence dissent. The legal pressure, once an insurmountable barrier, began to seem like just another obstacle in a long line of challenges that had defined Sophia's career. At the height of this media maelstrom, Sophia convened a meeting with her closest advisors and legal team in a quiet conference room far from the prying eyes of the media. Aaron Fisk laid out the next steps with the clarity of someone who had seen battles won and lost in courtrooms and public opinion alike. "We're at a crossroads," he said. "We can either continue to fight this battle in the legal arena, or we can take this as an opportunity to reform the way the media and corporate interests interact. The world is watching, and every move we make will set a precedent." Sophia listened intently, her mind racing through the implications of every word. This wasn't just a fight for her career. It was a fight for the very soul of journalism in an era increasingly dominated by money and power. In that moment, she made a decision that would define the next chapter of her life. She would fight not just for herself, but for every journalist who dared to challenge the status quo. In the days that followed, the legal pressure intensified. Musk's legal team filed motions and demanded further retractions, while her network scrambled to salvage their reputation amid mounting public outrage. The pressure was relentless, and every day felt like a battle fought on two fronts: the court of public opinion and the cold, unyielding corridors of legal proceedings. Then, in a dramatic twist that few could have predicted, Musk's legal team abruptly withdrew their lawsuit. A terse statement from Musk's camp announced that they were reassessing priorities, leaving behind a trail of speculation and uncertainty. For Sophia, the withdrawal was both a relief and a call to arms, a sign that the tide of public opinion had begun to favor transparency over intimidation. The moment of triumph, however, was bittersweet. Although the lawsuit had been withdrawn, the fallout had left scars that would take time to heal. Her network, which had once teetered on the edge of terminating her employment, was now forced to reevaluate its stance. In the weeks that followed, senior executives publicly apologized for their earlier indecision and promised to adopt stronger protections for journalists willing to challenge powerful interests. For Sophia, the victory was not measured in dollars or contractual terms. It was measured in the quiet acknowledgement that the truth had emerged victorious, even if only for a moment. She had not only saved her career, but she had also ignited a broader conversation about the role of the media in holding power accountable. Her journey from the high-stakes broadcast to the corridors of legal battles and media debates became a case study in resilience and the relentless pursuit of truth. In the aftermath of the legal drama, Sophia found herself at a crossroads once again. Offers for new positions poured in, not just from traditional networks, but from digital media platforms, independent news organizations, and advocacy groups that recognized her courage. While the experience had left scars and a lingering wariness of the machinations of power, it had also reaffirmed her belief that the press was indispensable to democracy. Her new chapter was not about returning to the comfort of a familiar routine. It was about reinventing herself as a champion of independent journalism, unafraid to confront the abuses of power wherever they arose. In a widely publicized interview with a respected national magazine, she reflected on the journey that had taken her from the bright lights of a primetime broadcast to the dark corners of corporate intrigue and legal warfare. "I've always believed that journalism is not just a profession, it's a calling," she said. Her voice steadied despite the memories of sleepless nights and endless battles. "When you have the courage to speak the truth, even when the odds are stacked against you, you inspire others to do the same. And that, in the end, is what makes a free society." As the months turned into a new season of her career, Sophia embraced her role as a mentor to young journalists, sharing the lessons learned from her ordeal. In intimate gatherings and public speaking engagements, she recounted the importance of integrity, resilience, and the willingness to stand alone if necessary. Her story, once seen as a cautionary tale of hubris and overreach, had transformed into a rallying cry for anyone who believed that the truth was worth defending no matter the cost. The media landscape was slowly changing as well. Her ordeal spurred internal reforms in several major networks and prompted regulatory bodies to consider new safeguards against the misuse of legal power to stifle critical voices. In boardrooms and editorial meetings across the country, the question was no longer, how do we silence dissent, but rather, how do we ensure that dissent is heard and respected? Looking back on that fateful period, Sophia often recalled the night the broadcast went live with a mixture of nostalgia and solemn pride. It had been a moment when every second felt charged with possibility, a moment when a single voice dared to challenge the might of a billionaire empire. Though the journey had been fraught with peril, it had ultimately reaffirmed a fundamental truth: that power, however vast, was not immune to accountability when faced with the unwavering pursuit of truth. In the end, the controversy surrounding her accusations against Elon Musk did more than rock the media world. It catalyzed a broader dialogue about the responsibilities of both the press and those who wield enormous influence. It reminded a generation that the fight for free expression was ongoing, and that, even in the face of overwhelming odds, the human spirit could rise to defend what was right. For Sophia, the battle was far from over. Each day brought new challenges, new questions to answer, and new stories to tell. But as she forged ahead into an uncertain future, she did so with a clear conviction: that truth was a flame that could never be fully extinguished, no matter how dark the night may seem. And so, the story of that one explosive broadcast transformed into a legacy, a testament to the resilience of independent journalism and the enduring power of the human will to speak truth to power. In the shifting landscape of modern media, where every word could spark a revolution or a ruin, Sophia Delacroix stood as a beacon for all who dared to question, to challenge, and to demand accountability from those who claimed to hold the reins of power. In recounting this saga, we see not just the rise and fall of a controversial broadcast, but a microcosm of a larger cultural battle, a struggle between unbridled power and the collective responsibility of a free press. Sophia's journey, marked by moments of fierce determination and heart-wrenching vulnerability, reminds us that every voice matters and that even the most daunting adversaries can be challenged when the truth is on the line. Her story continues to echo in boardrooms, newsrooms, and living rooms across the nation. It serves as a cautionary tale to those who would use their wealth and influence to dictate the narrative, and as a rallying cry to journalists everywhere: stand firm, for the light of truth is too vital to be dimmed by the shadows of intimidation. As the media landscape evolves and new battles over free speech emerge, the legacy of that one night, a night when controversy, courage, and conviction collided, remains a guiding light. For in every challenge, there is an opportunity to redefine the meaning of integrity, to champion the underdog, and to ensure that the truth, however contested, ultimately prevails.